What is alternate history? In this talk, when I say alternate history, I am referring to historical accounts that are said to be true within the modern spiritual community that contradict the current generally accepted version of history taught in schools. Let's look at different accounts of alternate history. Here, let's talk about Atlantis. Specifically, the fall of Atlantis and the events surrounding that fall. Now, many people in modern spiritual community accept the existence of Atlantis as fact. But when you begin to try to research the history of Atlantis from different sources in the modern spiritual community, you will find many different accounts. A lot of these accounts seem to contradict each other. For example, there are a couple of teachers in the spiritual community that I really enjoy that have two very different accounts of the destruction of Atlantis. One of them puts forth the suggestion that at the end of times of Atlantis, more young souls were incarnating, bringing with them a sort of darkness, that this darkness turned into a desire to control and dominate, which led to war and ultimately destruction. The other claims that Martians crash-landed near Atlantis, and through a series of interesting and fantastic events, it was they who caused the end of Atlantis. So in this example, we have two different views of a portion of alternate history. This is the kind of thing that can cause potentially damaging controversy within the modern spiritual community. It is my intention here to share with you the potential problem as I see it. Afterwards, I would like to illustrate a potential solution to this problem. To begin, let's imagine two people coming to an event like this who have never before met. We will call them Billy and Bobby. They are both relatively early in their spiritual awakening, and once they open the floodgates of possibility, they find themselves overwhelmed with the information that is out there. So, in between talks, they meet at the coffee station. Bobby notices that Billy is wearing a t-shirt that says, "I still miss Atlantis." They have a good laugh about this t-shirt and start to talk about what they have learned about Atlantis in their own journey. Soon they begin to quote things they have heard on the subject that contradict what the other has learned. And the conversation moves away from a discussion of Atlantis and becomes a back and forth regarding the credentials of the teachers each one gathered their information from. As the conversation goes back and forth, they begin to realize that many of the things that they have heard in modern spiritual circles are at odds. They decide they are going to see what is really going on around here. And so, Billy and Bobby put together a plan to record the rest of the speakers that day. When they go back to the hotel room, they took what the speakers were talking about on various subjects and made internet searches to see what other people were saying. In doing so, their goal and intention was to see if there was any consistency within the spiritual community. Each talk and each seminar that they cross-referenced led them to multiple teachers who had very different presentations of the same information. The more that they searched, the more the apparent contradictions came forth. After a time, Billy and Bobby concluded that the entire spiritual community was making this stuff up as they went along. They decided to skip the rest of the conference and go get some coffee. So, as their conversations turned to a more mainstream view of reality, they soon realized that they had each voted for a different political party and found therefore they could not be friends. Here we have two people that were very excited about their new understanding of reality and their spiritual awakening. Two people who suddenly made a complete 180. Well, who could blame them? In our modern times from birth, we've been taught that there is only one right answer. There is only one reality within that framework. The problem quickly arises that there are as many opinions on what that reality is as there are people on this planet. This can lead people to believe that there is no way of knowing how reality works, and therefore it's pointless to ponder it. For some, it drives a deep inner desire to discover that one reality and how it works. I fell into this second category. In my teenage years, I developed a doctrine that I thought answered it all. A belief that required only one thing to be accepted on faith. If you accepted that one thing, then everything else was explained quite simply. So first, I accepted on faith that the universe was infinite. No beginning, no end, no edge, no center. There's, of course, no way to prove that this is true. That's where the faith comes in. I did exactly what modern accepted science did with the Big Bang. You give me one free miracle and I'll explain the rest. Within this framework of infinity, it becomes objectively true that anything is possible. The thought process going something like this: within an infinite system, an infinite amount of things are going to happen an infinite amount of times. Not only once, but over and over and over again. Therefore, anything is possible, but no one thing from a narrow perspective is likely to be true. And so we should just get over ourselves and be kind to each other. This statement became my mantra whenever anyone would bring up religion or science as a way of explaining the universe. I saw absolutely everything in this reality as having its own probability of whether or not it would happen in an infinite universe. And since the system was infinite, no matter how improbable that something was to be, it was going to happen. And that explained all of the things I could see around me. The universe, in my experience, was essentially Darwinian in this way, and having thusly figured out the entire secret of existence, I felt content in my findings and went on with life without a second thought of what was going on outside of my immediate sphere of influence. And so, all through my 20s and most of my 30s, I lived life without any thought of an underlying consciousness pervading all that is. It was a chronic case of terminal alcoholism that caused me to question all that I had believed in the past. It became necessary to my very survival to endeavor to discover something greater than myself that was conscious of my existence, even more so, something outside of humanity's shared experience, that cared if I lived or died. The more that I looked into different spiritual beliefs, the more I saw a common thread that suggested every conscious being is a part of one all-pervading consciousness that is experiencing itself in different ways. That this consciousness creates creators that create realities, that create beings, that create experience. That this process is timeless, and that anything can happen, has happened in one timeless moment. To my mind, this created chains of events that would bleed into each other in an infinitely woven tapestry that was self-similar. For me, it is helpful to think of this conscious source of all things as the One. And so, at some point, the One became aware of itself. In a place of timelessness, it realized that through thought, it could create another version of itself. In that same timeless moment, it also realized that if it could create itself, it could create other things. To my mind, it was at this precise non-moment that the One became the point at the center of an ever-expanding sphere. And so the gross volume of this sphere became what some would refer to as the all. Contained within the all was/is absolutely every single possible thought, being, vibration, mode of expression, emotion, anything we can think of. Now remember, here we are, still in the timeless first moment. Naturally, every infinitely fine point within the gross volume of this ever-expanding sphere was a self-similar reflection of the One, because that is all that it knew to create in the beginning. Being a self-similar reflection of the One, each point within the ever-expanding sphere was also a creator that did what creators do and sent forth from itself an infinite sphere of infinite self-similar possibility from the point that it perceived as center. And so, this is one mental picture I use to visualize the instantaneous creation of all that is. Now, it's at this point that one might ask, how can this possibly tie back to Billy and Bobby? Bear with me, folks. It does come back round, I promise. So, all of this happens instantaneously in one timeless non-moment. Now, I imagine if I was the infinite one source of all creation looking for something to do, I would be somewhat dissatisfied. Being timeless and instantaneous, this didn't really fill a lot of the yawning, infinite emptiness that I found myself floating in. I would imagine that I would want to know more, now that I knew that knowing was a thing, about that which had just happened, that which I had created. And so it is my understanding that the One was compelled to look at what it created. In what I will call the timeless second non-moment, the One looked at the closest point to itself, then the next point, and the next, expanding outwards from itself in perfect spirals with naught but conscious attention, experiencing the all. In doing this, the One created within the all distance. And so, distance from the first self became time. Once time was created, the One could leisurely experience the all as fully as it cared to in any given moment. The closer to first center the One placed its attention, the more similar it found the all to be at that point. As it traveled outward, the One found the all to be less similar than it perceived itself to be at the first center, and yet it could still see the similarities inherent within. This is how I perceive time within a timeless system: distance from center.